Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the job of the SEC is to protect investors, not the fossil fuel industry. And when you were nominated 2.5 years ago, you said that giant corporations should not be able to hide their climate risks from investors. Without a strong climate risk disclosure rule, that is exactly what companies will continue to do. You have a mandate to protect investors. You have strong public support to do this, and I just want to say it is time for you to get this job done. But instead of spending the rest of my time fencing with you over when you're going to get this rule out on climate and a strong rule on climate, I want to shift gears and talk about private equity. When private equity funds acquire a company, they and the companies they buy don't have to follow many of the rules that apply to publicly traded companies and brokers that are selling registered securities. So last month, the SEC finalized new rules that ban some, but not all, of private equity's most abusive tactics. Even so, after the rule change, private equity funds can still use registration exemptions intended for small businesses to raise trillions of dollars in the private market without filing public disclosures. That is a great deal for private equity, not such a good deal for investors. Again, SEC's job is to protect investors, but more and more people are at risk because they're sucked into markets that have weaker rules. Chair Gensler, do you have a ballpark estimate of how much money investors poured into the private equity markets, private markets, including private equity markets, where they're covered only by the weaker SEC disclosure rules?
The private funds total assets under management are about $26.5 trillion.
But how much was poured in last year? Do you know the number? I want to look at what's happening now.
I'm sorry, it's in the low single-digit trillions.
Well, does $4.5 trillion sound right to you?
We could get back, but it's probably in the ballpark.
Right. Okay, it's right. So do you know how much money investors put in the same time period into the public market where they got much better protection?
What you're highlighting is there's as much activity and in some years more activity in the private markets than the public markets.
Do you know what the number was last year?
I suspect you're going to tell me.
I am. It was $1 trillion. In other words, the SEC is carefully regulating a public market that handles only about 1 in 4 new investment dollars, while almost 3 out of 4 dollars are going into a private market that has much weaker rules. And those weaknesses are meaningful, even after the rules change. So, for example, private equity firms selling exempt securities don't have to report audited financial data to the public. Also, they don't have to disclose data showing that a company has lost all of its contracts or is getting sued for billions of dollars. Seems to me like that is an invitation for fraud. The SEC was built so that investors could have confidence in the honesty of markets, and now 3/4 of investments that are coming in are not getting those basic protections. So, Chair Gensler, how do you explain to the American people that the SEC, whose job it is to make sure that markets are honest, is standing by while private equity and the companies they own scoop up investor money without any public verification that the books are honest or that they aren't hiding huge risks? Isn't it your job to fix that?
Well, part of what we did in a finalized rule just a few weeks ago was require quarterly reporting on their fees, performance, and side letters, and then at least annual audits of those documents.
So let me just say here, Chair Gensler, since we are really pressed on time, I'm not disputing that you've done good things. I hope I said that right at the beginning. You have. But these look like 2 giant holes to me. And the question I'm asking is, how do you explain to investors who now represent 3/4 of all the new investment money that you're not even making these guys do an audited financial statement?
Well, actually, the rule that we just finished has an annual audit in it. So it's of these private funds, not of the underlying companies, but of the private funds themselves.
Well, let me just say, we're out of time. I really think that given the risks in this market, I appreciate what you've done. There's more still to do, and I hope we can do it as quickly as possible.
I thank you.
Thanks, Senator Warren.